This is Kerrigan and Company. Are you looking for the perfect holiday gift for the Boston lover on your list? My friends at College Hype can help. My City Gear, powered by College Hype, has a wide array of custom apparel for your favorite townie. Shop for short and long sleeve t-shirts, hoodies, and much more, all in a wide variety of designs. Plus, they have apparel that's specific to Boston, Charlestown, Dorchester, and Southie. Enter code KIM20 at mycitygear.com to get 20% off your entire order. That's promo code KIM20 for 20% off at mycitygear.com. Hey everybody, it's Kim. Coming up next, a New York Times best-selling author keeping me company right here on Kerrigan and Company.
Kerrigan and Company is here for you. Yes, Kerrigan and Company is here for you.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of Kerrigan and Company. It's so good to have you with us, brought to us, of course, by A&B Burger. We got a great show today, and I'm so glad that you've joined us for it. Keeping me company today is someone I have known for a number of years. He's only the second guest on the Kerrigan and Company podcast who has been invited back for a second time, and he is also a New York Times best-selling author. I am so happy to have my friend and an incredible professional, Casey Sherman, keeping me company today. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Kim, and I feel like I'm in elite company to be asked back and then to be co-hosting with such a pro like yourself.
Well, the first time you came, which was, I think, like in our second podcast. I think it was just, number 2. We had so many great things to talk about, and we said then, you got to come back. And, Casey, every time, I keep track of you through social media, and you and I kind of chit-chat back and forth. Every time I'm checking on you, you've got another project starting, which I just sit back and smile. I do have to tell you.
I appreciate that, and I wish my wife would say the same thing. But I think me without a project is not necessarily the happiest person in the world. So there are so many great stories out there to tell, and such a limited time to tell it. So I'm looking at the next 10 years of my own career. What stories really are standing out to me? What stories do I need to get on paper or out to the public now? And I'm very excited to have a few of these projects, in either the final phase or just the beginning of the project.
Well, what I love is that you turn these projects into more than just books, as if just books isn't enough. First off, Casey just mentioned to me he's about to have his 20th book published. Of those 20, Casey, how many of them have turned into something more than a book?
Sure. I mean, 20 books over the past 22 years.
That's
so I usually,
write
a book a year. Everything I do, I like to have different life forms for because, not a lot of people read books, and I understand that. So I've got audiobooks, I've got stage productions that I've been so fortunate to partner with some great professionals in the theater community that have, really helped me adapt my work to a live audience. And quite frankly, there's no greater thrill for me than to be in front of an audience, say at the Wilbur Theater, and to share these investigations that are so personal to me.
So let's talk about that. You've got one that's coming up next spring. Talk about the book and what's happening there.
Sure. The theatrical is called A Nightmare with Casey Sherman, and I'll be taking 3 of my books to the stage that night. Search for the Boston Strangler, which was my first book and so very dear to my heart because my aunt, Mary Sullivan, was the youngest and final victim of that notorious 1960s murder spree. A Murder in Hollywood, which has been my most recent bestseller, which is a reinvestigation of a very notorious murder in Hollywood in 1958, featuring Lana Turner, the screen goddess that she was at the time. And then a book called Helltown. Helltown is a true story about a serial murder case on Cape Cod back in the 1960s. And my way into that story is not necessarily through the eyes of the serial killer, but through the eyes of 2 literary icons at the time, Kurt Vonnegut and Norman Mailer, who were in competition with one another to get the story first.
Which is, I think, just such a great way to approach that. That's going to be on stage.
It's going to be on stage, and I'm just incredibly proud to be working with a host of talented actors. You know, I'm pretty good at what I do, and I can explain my stories in a certain way, but there's nothing like having an actor come on stage and actually play Kurt Vonnegut or play, you know, Albert DeSalvo in the Boston Strangler case. It just breaks that fourth wall and creates an immersive experience for the theater goer that I think is very rare. I haven't actually seen anything like it done in any theater across the United States.
Yeah, I just think that's such a great idea. You've done it before.
Yeah.
And you just did one show at that point. This you plan to take on the road, you hope anyway.
I'm hoping, you know, everything I do, I like to see, you know, multiple audience for it. So, you know, we're going to start in Boston, see how it goes here, workshop it a little bit. You mentioned my previous stage production, Hunting Whitey, which is about the Whitey Bulger case starring Neil McDonough, a very famous actor in Hollywood who actually was raised on Cape Cod. Neil and I went to high school together at Barnstable High School, so I've been his friend.
He knew the Whitey story.
Yeah, he knew the Whitey story. We'd always wanted to work together. We had a great production team, Media Boss, which is a production team in Boston. We worked with, along with my co-author Dave Wedge, to bring this story to the stage. So, you know, it takes a village.
Sure.
When you're working on a theater production. Book writing is a little different. Book writing, it's a very solitary profession, and you're really a slave to, if you will, the people that you can get to open up.
Yeah.
Whereas theater, it's a collaborative and community effort.
Good for you. You get a little bit of all of it, right?
Try to, yeah.
And you know, the great thing about this, and I so appreciate this, you plan to donate the proceeds for this stage production that's coming up in March to the Pete Frates Foundation. You feel very strongly about that family. All of us from Massachusetts understands who that is.
Yeah, Pete Frates is a hero of mine. You know, my co-author Dave Wedge and I, we wrote the biography of Pete's life that we're hoping to turn into a feature film soon. And I understand that, you know, although Pete is gone, his mission still endures. There are families living with ALS every day that need support, and that's what this theatrical will be, at least allowing a little of that support for that incredible family and so many families around the Commonwealth.
Absolutely. Case, I want to talk about the new book, and we're going to get to that eventually, but I just want to ask you a little bit about the research for all of these books. Clearly, you have a fascination and sort of a nose for this kind of investigation, because most of them are crime-related.
Most of them are crime-related, and I think it does go back to my aunt's murder in 1964. Even though I wasn't even born at that time, I grew up in the shadow of my aunt, Mary Sullivan, and I always wanted to find out what really happened to her. So, you know, a question about the guilt or innocence of the so-called Boston Strangler led me to journalism school, led me to kind of where I am today. And I always look at stories, and I call myself the archaeologist of words. It's the digging that I really appreciate, finding something new or maybe something even overlooked over time. And you know, shining a lens on that and wondering, okay, is this going to be the impetus to move this case into a different direction? And fortunately, a lot of my books have turned out that way.
Do you run into, you know, walls? I mean, at times, have there been ideas that you've started to chase and then you realize this is going nowhere?
Sure. You know, there was a case that I was working on years ago about a young man who had committed a murder, somebody that I knew, and I was about to write that story, but, you know, the victim's family reached out to me, and it was so personal to them, and they didn't want to relive it because it wasn't worth it in their eyes. They had been trying to cope with that loss for so many years. I get it. I've been on the receiving end of those phone calls and those questions, so I did pull back from a project like that. But other times, Kim, and you and I as journalists, we know that when we pick up a phone, you know, the person on the other end can be very open with us or can slam that phone down.
Absolutely.
And it's how do you know, build rapport and build a relationship with the people that you're hoping to write about and allow them to trust you. You know, that's the key thing. I think, you know, knowing that my family's been through it, I have a certain, you know, viewpoint and an empathy, especially towards the victims' families, that may allow them to open up to me as opposed to some other reporter.
Sure, absolutely. What's the ultimate story that you'd like to do? Is there, I mean, I know you said you're looking 10 years out. Is there something out there that you're thinking, wow?
Well, the white whale, I mean, there are two.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if you're talking true crime, you're talking Jack the Ripper. The Kennedy assassination is something that people have been hounding me about for years. But to that point, Kim, it's if I can bring something new to the story, then I'm all in. When Dave Wedge and I wrote Hunting Whitey, so many books have been written about Whitey Bulger, his life of crime in South Boston. We focused on his life on the run and the FBI's commitment to capturing him. And we were able to at least bring a different angle to the story that had really never been explored before.
Did you ever meet him?
I had met Whitey, actually. I lived in South Boston in the early 1990s at 10 Thomas Park, right across the street from South Boston High School. So we would see Whitey Bulger in the neighborhood, quite regularly before he skipped town. But once he was arrested, I never got a chance to meet him. But my co-author, Dave Wedge, and I, we did correspond with his killer, Freddie Gias, and we're the only reporters to get access to his killer, who was in solitary confinement at the time, writing us letters in a rubber-tipped pencil because the guards were afraid that either he'd stab himself or he'd try to attack them.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about the new book.
Sure.
Which is coming out. It's already pre-sales, right?
Pre-sales are...
It's coming out in April.
Yeah.
The name of the new book is
Blood in the Water. And it's about the notorious Nathan Carman case that goes back to 2016 in, popular memory. It was about a young man who was on the autism spectrum who took his mother out on a deep-sea fishing trip off the coast of Rhode Island. The boat went down, the mother goes missing, and this young man, Nathan Carman, is a castaway on a life raft for about 7 to 8 days, depending on who you talk to, until he was rescued by a passing Chinese cargo ship. And when we all heard about it in the media, it was a bittersweet story. We thought, oh boy, it's incredible that this young man was saved, but it's tragic what happened to his mother. But when they brought him back to the Coast Guard station here in Boston, they began to pick at his story. And they didn't believe what he was telling them because they figured, if the boat went down where you say it went down, Nathan, then you would have drifted in the opposite direction from where you were actually picked up. Then they realized that he's also the prime suspect in his grandfather's shotgun murder 3 years prior, all allegedly to seize control of a $50 million family fortune.
Right. Can you give us any ideas about what you found out? I know you don't want to give too much away, and I can understand that.
No, I'm so excited about this story because I came into it thinking one thing. I'd read everything I could about the Nathan Carman case, and I went in, with kind of blinders on, which I normally don't do, but it allowed me to put all those news reports to the side and focus on the 30 to 40 witnesses that I interviewed about this story. And I came away with a lot of questions about Nathan Carman's guilt.
Wow. All right. Well, that's something we can look forward to, and that's coming up in April, which is amazing. Hey, by the way, just a little side note. Apparently one of your books was a clue on Jeopardy.
Oh,
is that true?
The highlight of my career thus far. I've had major motion pictures, a lot of television shows. A friend of mine, called me or texted me one night and said, I think one of your books was just a question on Jeopardy. And it was a book I wrote about the Cuban Missile Crisis called Above and Beyond. And my wife and I watched Jeopardy religiously every night. It's the one night we didn't watch, and I was stunned. And she was stunned as well, so we both turned it on, and that was such a thrill.
And you said actually it helped the book again, correct?
It did, yeah. It put the book right back on the bestseller list on Amazon. So all of those, little nods to the book, so many years after I wrote it, are very well appreciated.
Oh, I love that. Hey, Casey, you may be familiar, but we do this thing called the Fast Five.
Okay.
All right, and it's a College Hype Fast Five. College Hype, making a difference, one T-shirt at a time. Visit collegehype.com today. I've got 5 questions I'd like to ask you, and it's rapid fire, 30 seconds. Ooh. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Other than you, who's your favorite author?
Hemingway.
Best thing about growing up on Cape Cod?
The beach.
Favorite holiday?
Christmas.
Who was your celebrity crush when you were growing up?
Farrah Fawcett.
Oh, that's a good one. And the best piece of advice for someone thinking of writing a book?
Write because you love it, not because you want to write a bestseller.
I love that. Very good. Did somebody give you good advice about writing a book?
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be here without all the support that I've had from writers that, quite frankly, I didn't even deserve to be in the same room with, but they were very kind to me and supportive of me, which is why I always try to pass that along to the next generation of writers. And I get, emails and phone calls quite regularly. And if there's an opportunity to help some of these young writers, I jump at the chance.
Casey, do you have times when you just have the famous writer's block and you just cannot put another word on paper?
A lot of that happens and you have to work through it. I will say writing is about discipline and dedication. And you have to just sit there and stare at your laptop or whatever you write on and wait for that idea to come.
Yeah.
Don't walk away from it. Tackle it head on. I think, music helps. Creating a writing environment for yourself really helps as well. But being in your writer room or your office on the sunniest day of the summer or the best day of fall where everybody else is outside and posting on social media, you need to bite the nail, as Hemingway says, and attack that story.
Absolutely. Hey, our friends at College Hype always give our participants a T-shirt, and there you go, my friend.
Lovely.
Many thanks
Excellent.
to the people at College
Thank you
Hype.
so much. All right.
All right, still to come. Casey's, of course, going to stay with us and keep me company for the rest of the show. We've got some really great guests. Coming up next, a young woman. I'm blown away by this. She's the general manager of the professional hockey team here in Boston, and she's very young. She could almost be one of my kids.
Oh, jeez. That's exciting.
We're going to introduce everybody to her when we come back. This is Kerrigan and Company. Are you looking for the perfect holiday gift for the Boston lover on your list? My friends at College Hype can help. My City Gear, powered by College Hype, has a wide array of custom apparel for your favorite townie. Shop for short and long sleeve t-shirts, hoodies, and much more, all in a wide variety of designs. Plus, they have apparel that's specific to Boston, Charlestown, Dorchester, and Southie. Enter code KIM20 at mycitygear.com to get 20% off your entire order. That's promo code KIM20 for 20% off at mycitygear.com. This segment of Kerrigan and Company is brought to you by Lucia Lighting and Design, where people in the know go for the best possible lighting and design experience. Welcome back, everybody, to Kerrigan and Company. Great to have you with us for this episode. Casey Sherman is keeping me company today. And Casey, I'm excited about our next guest. This is so great. Last year, of course, the city welcoming professional women's hockey team, the Boston Fleet, it's now been called. And wow, we came out of the box hot.
And that's been the great thing. So much attention has been really focused on the fleet, on the players, on the general manager. It's very exciting to kind of welcome another professional sports team here to New England.
Well, and we love our sports teams, that's for sure. Joining us is the general manager. This is Danielle Marmer, and it's great to have you with us here on Kerrigan and Company.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Would you say that would not be an underestimation by saying they came out hot last season?
No, definitely not an underestimation. I mean, the league in general, the excitement, the buzz, in all 6 markets was incredible. But in Boston, I mean, we really felt the support. And then in terms of, the actual hockey and the play, we had an incredibly successful season, making it to, the final game of the final series for the Walter Cup final. So I think in every sense, it was, we came in with a splash for sure.
With a splash and a little incentive to do a little bit better this year and bring that championship home. The Songus Arena is so interesting and such a great venue for the team. You guys seem to have a really strong fan base. And let me ask you a question. With all of the popularity that Caitlin Clark has in basketball, she's the biggest name in basketball, male or female, I would argue. Has that translated into the excitement around women's hockey as well?
I think so. I think, the last couple of years has been a really exciting time for women's sports. It doesn't matter what the sport is. Women's volleyball has picked up in a major way. We're adding an NWSL team to Boston. You've got, like you mentioned, Caitlin Clark and the WNBA and even just women's college basketball. So I think it's an incredibly exciting time. And people are paying attention. Turns out people like to watch women's sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Danielle, I want to talk about you because I think you're someone really special. You are a young woman running this team. You were born in Foxborough, raised up in Vermont, and played hockey at Quinnipiac, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So you've been a lover of hockey, it sounds like, all of your life. You held a really interesting position with the Boston Bruins before you went to work for the Boston Fleet. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was hired as a player development and scouting assistant. And so, what that means in the NHL, players are drafted at 18 years old and they don't necessarily come and make an impact in the organization until their early 20s. And so it was my job to help make sure that they were developing appropriately and that they were emphasizing the parts of their games that were going to translate to pro hockey and to the NHL ultimately. And so it was a really, really neat process to help these players sort of pursue their dreams.
Mm-hmm. And you were the first woman to hold that position with the Bruins, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, how'd that feel?
I am so appreciative of everyone on that staff. I didn't notice any difference. Like they treated me the same. They were so welcoming and really took me under their wing. And I learned so much just about the professional side of the game. I recognized it was a big moment for young girls out there who could see themselves working in the NHL and working in professional hockey. But I'm fortunate to have had there are women who have been role models who are working in the NHL. Jessica Campbell is a great example of that. She's the first assistant coach in the NHL
for the Kraken.
So there have been women who have come before me who've opened the door, and my hope was just that I would keep that door open for women to continue to come through it.
And it seems like the Bruins have been incredibly supportive of the Fleet.
Yeah, very lucky to have, Patrice Bergeron announced our captains last season. He came and dropped the puck at our home opener. Don Sweeney's come to a game. A lot of their staff has come, and they stay connected. I am very fortunate to have great relationships with the people on their staff, and I connect with Ryan Nato is the head of amateur scouting for the Bruins. I connect with him on a weekly basis. I talk to their analytics team. I definitely rely on them and use them as resources and pick their brain as often as I can.
So, Danielle, you've had that exposure to the NHL, and now you've moved over to the Women's League. Talk to us about the differences there. And obviously, I mean, this is a league that's only existed for this past year, and I know we're hoping to expand out another 2 teams next season. But, are we off to a good start with this league to move this up to be at the level maybe, of existing leagues?
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the differences, it's really just about how established the NHL is at this point. But this league, it's the first. There's been an attempt. There's been professional leagues in the past, and I would say that this is the first true viable option for women to pursue professional hockey, in that the investment from the ownership, Mark and Kimber Walters and Billie Jean King, they're providing the resources for this to be a sustainable league for these women for this to be their full-time job, and they don't have to worry about anything else but their development and their play on the ice. And so, there's probably more similarities at this point than there are differences with the NHL. I mean, these are just the best players in the world playing in one league. They're incredibly talented, incredibly competitive, and it's really exciting to be a part of.
Now, we talk about the play on the ice. How important is community relations to kind of building up the groundswell of excitement for your team in the league?
It's massive. It's so important to us. It's one of our 3 priorities is community impact. So I love that you brought that up. We want to be out in the community. I think there are 2 things that all athletes in Boston have in common, and one is they win championships, and 2 is they impact the community in an immense way. Like, it's so important. You talk to anybody on the Bruins, you talk to the Celtics, Patriots. It doesn't matter what team it is. They care about making Boston a better place, and that's where we are as well.
So let's talk about this upcoming season, what you see on the ice, what you anticipate. I know Casey has already said there's a goal now, obviously, to win that last game. But talk to us about what you see coming down the pike this season.
I think, from a fan perspective, games are only going to continue to get faster, to be more physical. Every team got so much better through the draft this season. They're just better players coming to the league. So I think, from the product itself, is only going to improve. But from a fan perspective, I mean, they can expect there's going to be more activation at games, more opportunity to connect with players, just more of a buzz, more things going on at the arena. Like, we want this to be an exciting night to take your kids to a game, or to, for there to be just more activation than you would normally get when you go to a Bruins game, for example, because we have to do that. We have to differentiate ourselves, and we have to be a little bit different, and that's something that we're prioritizing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you've got a great logo, so the swag that the Fleet has right now, I'm sure is going to be incredibly successful. We're going to get a sweatshirt like that. Absolutely.
How did you guys come up with that name in the end?
That was, a group much smarter than I am. We have a phenomenal business team, and with that, they had, branding consultants and a marketing team who ultimately came up with the names and the logos. And I think they nailed it when it came to Boston.
Yeah, I think they did too. I love the logo, and I think it's a good one, and it sticks in your mind. That's for sure. It does. Let's talk about the expansion of the league. I mentioned it earlier, but I know that there's talk that there could possibly be 2 more teams added in the 25-26 season, correct?
Yeah, it's something that the league's exploring at this point. Mm-hmm. They're very early in the process, so they're just sort of testing the waters to see what cities and what markets seem interested, and where what would be a good fit to add to the league. But I think it's just emphasizes the excitement around women's sports and women's hockey, and the fact that this league is already ready to grow is such a great sign for our sport and for women's sports. As
a GM, would you like to see the league get bigger? I mean, and expand westward, by the way? Yeah,
of course. I mean, I think ultimately, you think about the NHL and the original 6 and where they are now. I think that's the goal, right? Like, you want to be in a league where there's a ton of teams, where the parity is high, the competition is high, and you're playing for a championship, not just from 6 teams, but at some point 20, 30.
Sure.
We want this game to grow, and we want there to be an opportunity for women to continue to play in it.
Absolutely. Danielle, tell people how they can get tickets to come and see you guys play.
If you head to our website, if you go to the pwhl.com, you can select Boston Fleet, and all of our games will be on that schedule, and you can buy half packs, you can buy individual game tickets. Yeah. So all of that's for sale. Get your tickets and show up to the Songa Center.
All right. General Manager of the Boston Fleet, this is Danielle Marmar. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet. And a quick reminder to everybody who's listening, first game, it's November the 30th.
That's right.
Away they go again. It's going to be very exciting. All right. When we come back, a good friend of yours is going to join us. And she's going to talk about some of the struggles that she's faced and some of the ways that she would like to see those struggles rectified. This is Kerrigan & Company. The holiday season is just around the corner. Before all those family gatherings and holiday parties, you'll want to spruce up your home. Let me suggest that you start with updating your lighting. It can make all the difference when you're entertaining. The folks at Lucia Lighting Design in Lynn can help you achieve the perfect atmosphere, whether it's soft, welcoming lighting in the dining room or a workstation in the kitchen. Owner Lucy Dearborn and her team can make suggestions and guide you through the process. If you can imagine it, the experts at Lucia Lighting Design can make your dreams come true. Learn more at lucialighting.com. That's lucialighting.com.
If you like rum, you're going to love Rumson's Rum, New England's most award-winning rum brand. Rumson creates distinctive and savory flavor profiles by hand-selecting and marrying the finest barrel-aged Caribbean rums. The spirits are then blended and finished in the New England Rum House. Choose from Rumson's Gold, Spiced, Grand Reserve, or Coffee Rum, which is smooth and sweet with a warm roasted coffee flavor, a hint of vanilla, and a decadent buttery finish. Find Rumson's at liquor stores or ask for it at your favorite restaurant. Learn more at rumsons.com. That's rumsons.com. Rumsons. Life lived, life enjoyed.
This segment of Kerrigan & Company is brought to you by Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater. Titanic, the musical, is now playing through November the 10th. Get your tickets at nsmt.org. Welcome back, everybody, to Kerrigan & Company. Great to have you with us today, of course, presented by A&B Burger. Keeping me company today, New York Times bestselling author and my longtime friend, Casey Sherman. And Casey, you brought this next guest to me. I actually, long ago, met Eliza Dushku in the studios at Fox 25 because, of course, she is a longtime actress, a very successful actress, and a hometown gal. And we interviewed Eliza. It's great to see you, by the way.
Thank you.
In the studio.
By the way, thank you for your nice words.
Oh, well, it's true. And it was a treat to meet you then, and it's great to have you here on the show. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
You grew up in Watertown.
I did, and thank you for bringing me on.
Our pleasure.
And I guess the only thing I would amend is that I really am a former actress. I mean, I'm really coming in today as in my new career,
right?
And I love it so much, and I have tremendous respect and appreciation for my former career. But I really do feel like I've lived two lives, and I'm in my second life. So,
well, not many people can say that, by the way, and be successful on both sides of it. So congratulations to you.
TBD. Let's see. I'm in the very beginning, but yes.
But you were in Los Angeles for a long time,
yeah.
And was had many roles and had a great career. Decided to come back this direction, come back east. Yeah. We've just chatted about the fact that maybe great weather here had something to do with it, but you did so because you went back to school.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that and what took you back to school.
Sure. I tripped and fell at my brother's audition when I was 9 in Harvard Square. I live in Cambridge now, so it's funny to drive by with my kids and point out where mommy's kind of first life began. And I ended up moving out to LA to do film and television when I was 17, just out of Watertown High School. I was there for many years, and for many years, even when I was in the midst of my career, I would say, at some point I'm going to move back to Boston and go to school and figure out what I really want to do when I grow up, because it was sort of it was a true trip and fall where I'd never really planned that. My family had never planned that, but it just took me a little longer than I expected. But somewhere around kind of 7-8 years ago, I had some stuff happening with family. My parents were aging and getting older and falling ill, and I really thought I want to go back to school. So I just took the plunge, moved back to Boston, enrolled at Suffolk University as a sociology major. From there, I ended up transferring to Lesley University for their holistic psychology program, which I loved. And then I met my husband, and we had our kids, and now I'm finishing my master's in May, and I'm now working as a clinical mental health care intern mental health provider for Mass General's military organization.
How important is it to be working with, the veterans that come home with these, what they call invisible, scars that, you can't really see, but they deal with it on such a very profound level every day?
To me, it's wildly important. And I actually heard at the organization I work at this quote, that this gives me chills to this day, this idea that coming home shouldn't be the hardest part about serving in the military. Yeah. And that's what I see day to day in my clinical work. I see people who have, were deployed, whether between 9/11 and today, and they have been, in and out of the VA, have had, 10 to 15 years of multiple prescription medications, multiple kind of like pass-off treatments, and they're just still suffering, and their families are still suffering, and there are suicide survivors, and there are the need is just so great with this population. And when I began doing my training for psychedelic-assisted therapy through the first accredited university in the United States, which was the California Institute of Integral Studies, to offer courses in this therapy, so much of our training was watching videos of veterans using psychedelics and in treatment, hours and hours of footage. And so you really got to see a before, during, and after. And it was extraordinary to witness the transformation, to witness people who described having been to sort of every shop on the block,
sure,
and being just about ready to end it all. And then they get access to this therapy, and their lives transform. I mean, I know sometimes it may seem like this is too good to be true, but it's that effective. And
so Eliza, when we're taping this, this is election day, and this issue is on the ballot here in Massachusetts, and we don't know what the outcome will be today. But this is a fascinating thing, I think, for a lot of people to learn about. A lot of people don't know about this kind of therapy. And I think that it has a stigma, and I know that you can understand that, because I think, Casey and I were just sitting here talking about it, and we were saying the same thing. I think people immediately go to, the 1960s and psychedelics and whatever that must have been. So walk us through, if you will, when you're working with these veterans, and obviously you have seen this therapy, working. Walk us through how it works, because people don't know how it works.
Absolutely. So I have been very open about my experience with addiction and recovery. I did drugs as a teenager and as a 20-something-year-old. Like many others, psychedelics were not my drug of choice because inherently psychedelics are not known to be addictive. I mean, I experimented. I had experiences here and there, but they were not my drug of choice. But I had worked with them, and I think we all have these memories of the 70s and, like you said, the hippies and the rose-colored glasses, and hearing maybe some horror stories about, hey, I knew a guy who took a psychedelic and he, did something crazy and never recovered. What I've come to learn in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of doing research on the research is that there was so much research being done leading up to the war on drugs and Nixon kind of making everyone think all drugs are equal and all drugs are bad, and criminalizing and making all these drugs Schedule I drugs. When the reality was, the research was so promising that using psychedelics in a therapeutic way with preparation sessions, making sure a patient is in the right set and setting, which means their physical surrounding is a safe surrounding and their mental setting is appropriate for them to be taking these. And in that capacity, they're used as a tool to the therapy. They're not the therapy, but if you think about it, you take the psychedelic and it allows you to drop into a space where all of your sort of conditioning that's been packed on over the years sort of disappears, and you get really in tune with what's really going on with you. And if you're sitting in a space with two trained therapists, and they can guide you and hold you in a safe, they call it a safe container, a safe way. And then when you come out of the sessions, part of these therapy protocols involves an integration session the next day, which is basically coming in, going over, because your therapist will write down things that you're experiencing, but you go over what you experienced, and then then you can make new meaning of circumstances from your life or traumatic memories or through this new lens. So the research was being done and it was tremendous. Then we had the war on drugs and it just stopped for so many years. But in the last 10 years, it has been revived. And there is so much evidence-based data that has come out that shows that psychedelic-assisted therapy is a tremendously effective treatment for many different mental health challenges, from PTSD, treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, eating disorders, end-of-life palliative care, so many different afflictions or mental health, challenges. It's really wildly effective when used in a therapeutic, regulated, safe way.
When you talk about the effectiveness, the veterans that I've spoken to that have gone through that therapy, they say the change is immediate. It's not something that, they feel over time, but after one session, they can begin to really see the transformative nature of that therapy. Would you say, just in terms of the obstacles that have been out there publicly, is big pharma an obstacle in terms of legitimizing, mushroom therapy or psychedelic therapy? Because not only is there a mental health aspect to this, there's a big financial aspect to this as well, with a lot of these major drug companies not willing to share, the audience, so to speak.
Sure. Well, I know there are many people who, yes, believe that the pharma companies want to keep us sick. They don't want to, help us cure our diseases, because then they won't have people on their medications for life. I think there is some, I can be persuaded into believing there's an element of that that's true. And I also think that there's just been such a lack of education around this. And what turns a lot of people, for me, frankly, is, people can think I'm talking about something that's so woo-woo and esoteric and out there, but brain scans, MRI brain scans, where we know how the brain operates at this point. We know about our amygdala at the back, at our brainstem, our fight, flight, fear, freeze response. This is our sort of reptile brain. When they do brain scans of people who suffer from PTSD, most of their brain activity is stuck back there in the amygdala. They show people's brain scans when they've taken psilocybin or other psychedelics, and the brains, the movement goes back up through the brain, up to the prefrontal cortex, which is our human brain, the part of our brain that has the ability to reason and understand, distinguish the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. And then we know, scientifically that these substances also promote neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to form new neural pathways. So it usually sort of evens off after childhood. When we're kids, we're firing and we're coming up with all these new ways all the time. It starts to even off. And for people who have trauma, they tend to get stuck in one ruminating, kind of concretized way of thinking, these certain pathways. But with psychedelics, they show again, is biologically, the brain lights up and new pathways form where people can have a different experience and not get stuck in those pathways. So scientifically, I think it's news to people that they have these mechanisms of action.
Well, again, I think there's been a real lack of education. This has only been legalized in 2 other states, Colorado and California. Of course, Massachusetts attempting to do so. Talk to me about how many of these treatments, on average, it takes for someone maybe to get back to a comfortable place in their mental health.
Sure. So, of course, there's no one-size-fits-all model, and everybody's different. And some of the protocols recently that were put before the FDA and with some of the, results that had come from them, anywhere between 1 to 3 sessions, these are not microdosing, to be clear. This is macrodosing. This is giving someone a full dose of a psychedelic that would give them a full kind of psychedelic experience, sort of altered state of consciousness. And it lasts about, anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. But you would typically do the preparation, do a day-long session, do the integration for sometimes weeks afterwards. I mean, you can have so much to integrate after just one session. And then depending, someone might come back for a second session, someone might come back for a third session. But some people find that after one session, they get what they need, so to speak. So it really is, it does vary. And
when you say get what they need, they get the information they need to begin to work forward in their mental health journey, correct?
I'm glad you say that because it is information, but it's also a knowing, and they talk about a felt sense. So from my experience personally, I talked about I can be told every day, all day, that I am safe today and that I am not where I was 25 years ago as a child when I was in an unsafe, traumatic situation. But just telling myself that doesn't necessarily make my body register that. And so when you work with psychedelics, people often, and in my experience, you feel it in a way that makes it real, that you don't forget. I mean, it's a felt sense of safety. It's a felt sense of knowing that trauma happened, but it's not happening now. And that's, I think, Bessel van der Kolk, one of the leading experts on trauma in the world, who's a BU professor. He's been very vocal about that exact fact. It's there's no other medication, there's no other treatment that gives people that peace, which is so important and so effective.
And can you talk a little bit about the support system that's in place for these sessions, and then for the patients to be going back and forth and getting the explanations or the awareness that they need following these sessions?
Sure. So that is sort of one thing that needs to be decided, since this is novel in some senses. I mean, in one sense, it's been used for thousands of years in many cultures, but today we're trying to figure out what that would look like. And we, in part, want to figure out what this could look like and how we could roll this out, because then it could, people talk about this being inequitable. we can't find equity with this unless it starts to take the necessary steps to move forward, where it could be seen by insurance.
Absolutely.
I mean, psychiatry isn't affordable for most people unless they have insurance or help from the government. So, but as this rolls out, in Massachusetts especially, for question 4, the idea would be there would be a two-year rulemaking process. There would be a commission that would be created of mental health experts. This is not like the Marijuana Commission where that was commerce-based. This is mental health experts from Massachusetts, where we have the best minds in the world, arguably, in medicine. 200 years of innovation here in Massachusetts. Anesthesia, baby formula, AIDS research. This is the place to get this moving and to start to form how this should be rolled out for the rest of the country, really. So the idea, from my perspective, might be that it is a different kind of psychotherapy than the classic models. So I think that it's very reasonable that people could work with a team of therapists just for psychedelic therapy and then bring the material back to their own therapist. There are different questions around what type of licensure the therapist should have. On the one hand, many people that have worked with these medicines in indigenous tribes, they didn't necessarily need to have an MD. They didn't have to have a medical degree. It doesn't take a medical degree oftentimes to know how to be with someone and to help them feel safe and to help them basically revisit a really challenging time in their life. So I do think personally there should be some element of mental health background and training. But I don't think that that it needs to be. So this is all where things would get figured out. But again, I think that the best minds in science in Massachusetts should be the ones figuring this out.
Yeah, the training issue was the next thing I was going to ask you about, because obviously, they're probably. You said you had to go to school out in California, the one school that had this kind of training. So we don't have that everywhere. So the access to that kind of training would have to expand, obviously.
I did do my training during the pandemic, so I was not out in California. It was a certification training, but when I would become a therapist, I would be a postgraduate. I would be graduating and working towards being a licensed mental health counselor. And I think supervision and kind of a connection to others in the community who know how to push this forward is important.
It's fascinating. It is so interesting. And I hope that, people are taking away from this, number one, some information about this, because I know nothing about it, and I don't think most people know all that much about it. Education seems to be the next step. A lot of people are going to need to be educated about it.
Just in terms of today, one thing I would add is this bill is two-part. The Massachusetts bill had the licensed regulated therapeutic use, and it also had a personal homegrown piece, which I think tends to scare people. The reality is, and I came to learn this because I wasn't as sort of familiar, but you can't decriminalize these medicines without a homegrown piece, because otherwise they're still federally illegal. You can't sell them, you can't buy them, there's no retail. So where would people get the substances? They're already using them in many ways, and the irony is the opposition has talked about the danger of buying online. Well, you're sending them online and to buy potentially tainted substances if they can't grow their own personal amount. Another piece is that if this passes, it goes to the legislature, and there's a 2-year rulemaking process where the size of the space could be amended, could be adjusted, could be improved. But if it doesn't get to the legislature, then it's just dead on arrival. So I think those are two pieces that I think are really important for people to recognize.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You were Faith on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Have you left Faith behind you? Was that a good time in your life?
I still pull her out sometimes.
There you go.
For sure.
I love it.
She's definitely in there somewhere. She's a fighter, and
yeah, absolutely. It's been great fun to see you and to hear all about this. What an educational piece this is for those who are listening. We appreciate it, and it's really been interesting to watch how strongly you have felt about this and how hard you've worked here in the state for
all the research, all the passion. When people come up to you, you've been the public face of this ballot question and this therapy for some time now. When you meet somebody on the street that has been looking for an advocate like yourself, what do they say to you?
people just, they thank me for sharing my experience, I think, personally. And that was a really difficult decision because it wasn't something I really pictured myself coming out with, having left a very public career. But I also felt that I had left a lot of pain on the table when I left my former career. And I'd be remiss if I didn't update what helped me so much. So I think people are very, it's nice for people to have a person who has had the experience, and I can sit and nerd out with someone for hours about the science because I am so passionate about it. And as a mental health clinician in training, as a mother of 2 small children, as a citizen, when I look around and a member of our society and this mental health crisis, we've named it. We all know how bad it is. We all know how serious it is, but we don't have enough tools currently. Right. The psychiatry field, everyone in the psychiatry field, everyone in the mental health field knows we don't have enough tools. And this may not be for everyone. It's not a panacea. It's not the silver magic bullet. But we know it's helpful for so many, so it should be an option. And that's what this ballot initiative is. It's mental health options for Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
So,
Eliza, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Great to see you.
So glad that you could be part of the show.
Cheers. I appreciate it.
This is Kerrigan and Company.
North Shore Music Theater proudly presents Titanic the Musical. This stirring story of the legendary ship and the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of her passengers is on stage now through November 10th. Tickets at nsmt.org.
Our friends at Sienna Aesthetic Spa in Beverly want to thank their loyal customers with a pre-holiday special. Get 50 units of Botox or any toxin and get 10 units free. And before you get those injections, how about a skin prep with a Hydrofacial Express for $150? That's a $199 value. Oh, and one more thing. The folks at Sienna will add a complimentary dermaplaning treatment to that facial. Get ready for the holidays. Set up your free consultation with the experts at Sienna Aesthetics in Beverly. Go to siennaaesthetics.com. This segment of Kerrigan and Company is brought to you by Sienna Aesthetics Medical Spa. Take years off your face with the very latest technologies at Sienna Aesthetics in Beverly. Welcome back, everybody. Casey Sherman keeping me company today. How about Eliza?
Amazing.
Yeah, I am so... I'm taken aback by her passion, but I'm also so much more informed just by chatting with her about the whole subject.
Well, she wasn't a so-called celebrity spokesperson. She's a real educator.
Yes, she is.
She knows her topic, and I learned a lot during that session as well.
Yeah, I really did. So you brought her to us, so thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I appreciate that. Okay, let's talk about what's coming up, because my head is spinning. You've got so many things coming up. So we've got a show in March at the Wilbur.
Show in March. Pre-sale tickets are online right now, wilburtheater.com. Proceeds go to the Pete Frates Foundation.
That's so great. If you need my help, let me know.
Absolutely.
And then we've got a book coming out.
Blood in the Water, April 8th. Pre-sale right now on Amazon.com.
Yep. And there's books out there, period. There's another 19.
Yep, correct. Just starting my next book. It's called The Devil and Frank Lloyd Wright, about the very famous architect and a mass murder that he was involved in very early in his career.
Which you were chatting with us a little bit before we got started today. That is going to be a fascinating book. It's just really, really great.
I can't wait to keep digging into the materials and come up with a really unique story to tell.
Listen, I'm so glad you could be with us today. You got to come back because
anytime.
You just constantly got all this stuff going on, and it's very exciting. So continued success.
You too,
so
Kim. Thank you.
For you. All right. And thanks, everybody, for joining us for this edition of Kerrigan and Company. Be sure that you follow us on social, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Kerrigan and Company. To find out who will keep me company and be my co-host on the next episode, be sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok. Kerrigan and Company is recorded at the Big Night Studios at the TD Garden in Boston. You can view the podcast on YouTube and listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure you tell a friend. The executive producer of Kerrigan and Company is David Thompson. Our engineer is Peter Hurley, and our social media managers are Grace Kerrigan, Colby Thompson, and Riley Thompson. See you next time.